Ci sono storie che anticipano la realtà. È accaduto così con lo schianto degli aerei sulle Torri Gemelli. In letteratura si sono schiantati ben prima del 2001. Speriamo che non sia così per 2034, il nuovo libro di Ackerman e Stavridis che descrive la prossima guerra mondiale. Purtroppo gli eventi di questi ultimi mesi, il libro è uscito a marzo negli Stati Uniti, sembrano confermare quanto succede e lo scontro tra due grandi potenze, Stati Uniti e Cina. Nel mezzo, in funzione da mediatore, l'India. Quindi una massa di popolazione enorme tra India, Cina e Stati Uniti e una prospettiva che cambia definitivamente i poteri in gioco. Ackerman è un marine veterano delle guerre di Afghanistan e di Iraq, un uomo che ha scritto già diversi libri ed è stato finalista ai più importanti premi americani. L'ammiraglio Stavridis è stato per lungo tempo comandante delle forze NATO, è un consigliere del Carlyle Group ed è stato in forze come candidato al ticket con Hillary Clinton e anche Donald Trump lo voleva come ministro della difesa. Parliamo quindi di due autori decisamente informati su quanto sta accadendo e su come stanno evolvendo gli scenari mondiali, sia a livello geopolitico sia a livello militare. Beh, che dirvi, c'è solo da sperare che tutto quello che hanno scritto sia fiction e che non diventi un libro di saggistica, ma per capirlo dovrete leggere il libro.
The first question is really how the idea of 2034 came about.
It came about when I looked at the past, at Cold War literature, the US-Soviet Cold War. And as we all know, there was a rich body of books and films about how terrible a war between the US and the Soviet Union might have been. Films like Dr. Strangelove, books like Red Storm Rising. And then it occurred to me that there was no similar book or film that really depicted what a war between the US and China might look like. So I went to my publisher, suggested the idea. He connected me with Elliot. Elliot and I had actually known each other for most of a decade. And thus we began to work on the novel together.
Now, how close the military technologies that you write about in the books are to reality?
All of those technologies are quite realistic by the year 2034. And all of them exist today, not quite as advanced as you finally see them in the book 10 years from now. And for me, that was one of the great joys of the book, was not focusing on the technology, but really focusing on the humans in the story.
Baked into every war is a miscalculation on one side, because both sides always go to war believing they are going to win. So if both sides believe they are going to win, one side always loses, which means one side has made a miscalculation.
Another interesting phrase from the book is that today's America starts the war but does not finish them. And that made me think, of course, of Afghanistan. And I wanted to ask both of you, what do you think of the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
When we look at the last 100 years, I think we could characterize them as having been an American century. And if that's the case, it's an American century that was really birthed in two European conflagrations, right? The First and the Second World War, which are both wars that the United States didn't start, but the United States certainly finished those wars, and particularly in the case of the Second World War, finished it on terms that were very favorable to the United States. So now the United States is in a position where it doesn't seem capable of finishing wars, but it certainly seems capable of starting them, and we've started a number of wars in the last 20 years. With regards to the end game in Afghanistan, I fought actually both in Iraq and Afghanistan, and recently I've been speaking with a few friends of mine who are veterans of both wars, and we've sort of asked ourselves, why does Afghanistan seem so much more bitter to us than what happened in Iraq? It's because if you look at American history, there are only 2 US wars that have been fought or predicated with an attack on the homeland. The Second World War with Pearl Harbor, and the war in Afghanistan with the September 11th attacks. I think it's been very I just speak for myself, very difficult to watch that withdrawal. I felt like it's been a complete and utter collapse of American leadership, of American competence. I think really it's been to me a collapse of competence and a collapse of in some ways our values, as we've left so many of our allies behind.
Afghanistan, on the other hand, Elliot correctly categorizes it's a defeat. It's a defeat that we chose, we quit. You know, and as we say in North Florida, you got to know the difference between quitting and getting beat. In this case, we quit, we walked away, and I think it was a mistake.
Which forces, in your view, risk to destroy America today?
Well, I think we see right now that one of the greatest national security threats facing the United States is our dysfunctional politics at home. So I think it would, in this book, as we're imagining the future, it's also important to recognize that the United States can only effectively counter a nation like China if it's able to come together. You know, over living in the United States over the past few years, and frankly, even before Donald Trump became president, I would often have conversations with American friends that would go something like, you know, I wonder if there were another attack like September 11th, as divided as we are, if the country would find a way to come together again. And we would wonder about that. And I would say with the pandemic, the United States was finally confronted with a crisis as existential as what happened on September 11th. And the country has not managed to come together. If anything, it led to one of the most divisive years in modern memory, which is 2020, and things aren't getting much better. So with all of that, I think it needs to be asked, how much is the greatest threat, national security threat facing the United States, in fact, the dysfunction that exists within the United States?